Good afternoon and welcome to today's Top Tips webinar. My name is James Evely and I'm the editor of In Publishing. The format of the webinar is very straightforward. Paul will make a 20-minute presentation, which will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A. To take part in the Q&A, simply type your question into the control panel in front of you at any time. I will then collate the questions and put as many of them as possible to Paul after his presentation. I won't read out the names of the people asking the questions, just the questions themselves. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you straight over to Paul.
Thanks, James. We appreciate the opportunity and the chance to get to speak to everyone today. I'll jump right into it. The first thing I'd like to do is share with everyone just a little bit about BlueToad, just to give you a bit of perspective. We founded our company in 2007, which happened to be when the iPhone was introduced. We work with thousands of publishers. We work with a lot of large commercial printers, and they offer our product to their customers. And so we think kind of our footprint in dealing with publishers on a daily basis gives us some good perspective and some best practices that we hope we can share with you today. So that's about us. The road for digital editions has really evolved over the years. And when we started 13, 14 years ago at BlueToad, I remember attending shows and people would walk up and go, hey, what's digital? Why do I need a digital edition? And we'd have those conversations. And maybe back in the day, it was more about because everyone else was doing it, or you just needed to have a digital product. And then that kind of evolved and it became more about native apps and the iPad when it was introduced. And then it became about mobile. And today, I think where we're at is there are a lot of devices and there are a lot of platforms, and your content needs to display well and basically present a good experience on no matter the device that your reader is coming at it from. So today we look at it more as a content experience and what's that like as people connect with your brand. Before we get into the top tips, we have 5 of them that we'll jump into. I did want to set the table a little bit with a couple surveys that we conducted. This one that's on the screen now was done just before COVID-19. It was a survey of just magazine readers. And what we found were 75% read magazines digitally already. 30%, as you see, actually preferred digital. The majority were using a phone, 57% were using a phone, and the #1 cited reason was convenience, which kind of makes sense. You have your phone, you get the digital magazine on it, you can click on it and read it. Sorry, a little pop-up there. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we talk a little bit about that we got from the survey was that readers want a responsive solution. They want to be able to read it on a phone. It needs to make sense, but there was an interesting connection with readers really wanting to still see a printed version in a digital form. And I think it really had to do with comfort, right? That's how content's been presented for a long time. That's how they're used to connecting with your brand. So that connection was something that was still important that we saw as we did our survey. We then did another survey after COVID-19 hit, and asked a series of questions, but a few pieces of information we got out of that. One was people are now starting to feel concerned, about their safety clearly, and that extended to mail and other deliveries. From there, we found that a majority of those who responded now were more likely to consume digital, partly because of this, and they were also more likely to now want to hear more from the brands they trust than they did previously. So there's a little shift that occurred, and we think that's an opportunity for publishers. So let's jump into the tips. The first one is just the model. Why have a digital edition? This is, like I said before, a question we've received for the entire time that we've had our company. I've been at booths and people come up, why do I need a digital edition? I have a magazine already, I have print, I have a website, I'm already on social media, where does this fit in? And again, the answers, everyone has different answers sometimes, but I think fundamentally what it all comes down to is you have an audience that wants what a digital edition has to offer. And that's a very specific experience. Your digital edition, if it's done right, can be a curated, packaged, and delivered experience, which is much like the print experience. Right? It's got a beginning, it has an end. you've collected this information and this content to deliver to the reader. And so it has all those kind of comfort components that your print has always provided, but then it has digital benefits, right? It's delivered on the devices that matter. It can be searched, it's instantaneous. Maybe there's a specific digital content that's that's unique to it. So it has all these additional elements, but that curated package delivered experience in our experience is something readers still want. And we saw it a bit in that survey that we sent out, where they still want that connection to that kind of traditional form. So one element when you're thinking of that method is, the question often will be, well, can I just publish content through my website? Well, there's a lot of people out there publishing content through their websites right now. And I think traditional publishers have an opportunity to stand out from that. And I think when you serve up content in this curated package delivered form, again, similar to the way your print's delivered, you have a cover, you have a beginning, you have that end. It serves as a visual cue to the reader that this is trustworthy content. This is somebody that's a professional publisher that's producing content for me. And I think they look at that content differently than when they're just on the web and they're just seeing stuff flowing constantly from all different directions. Kind of slides us into tip number 2, which is this still represents your brand. And I've seen lots of publishers that kind of haven't given that full thought when they're launching a digital edition product and presenting it to their readers. This is an opportunity. Much like we were just talking, that kind of package and how it's delivered and the elements that you produce and again provide to your readers gives you an opportunity to be different and stand out from all the other content that's out there. People are used to seeing content just roll one article after another off a website. But in this case, they're looking for something different, something more trustworthy, and your brand is what's going to make the difference. You being able to communicate your brand and be able to showcase it, and it's something you've put and invested a lot of money into over time. So it needs to be given some justice as you launch a digital product. I like to call it checking the box, but we see a lot of publishers that just do that. I need a digital edition. I'll just check the box. I have it. It's done. I don't really give it much more thought. I know I'm biased because this is partly what we do, but I think you should give it more thought. I think you shouldn't just check the box. And again, if you're doing something and you're presenting your brand to readers, it should be done well, and you should be giving it that thought. So a few things, obviously colors and fonts, make sure your logos are in place, but what content is presented and how is it presented? And then from a tech perspective, are you credibly delivering on what the reader expectations are? These are all factors that you really need to consider. We're seeing publishers leverage other content initiatives. So if it's a matter of linking efforts that you're already doing out there, your YouTube efforts or Vimeo efforts, or we see a lot of publishers that are jumping into podcasts in some form. All these elements can be brought into the digital experience, and your goal is to keep the reader engaged. You're investing in all these different pieces. You never know how a reader is going to get introduced to your brand and how they're going to decide to engage. So let's keep them engaged as best we can by presenting, in a good form, all of these elements, and basically providing a resource hub so that while they're in the digital edition, while they're reading the magazine elements, they can see this other content that exists. Another, just from a tech credibility standpoint, some things we're seeing. Clearly, podcasts and audio has really risen over the past couple of years. And so audio articles, like presenting audio versions of your content, is something we see publishers really embracing to try and take advantage of that. And that's both creating unique audio content for podcasts and converting your traditional kind of written content into an audio form. So that's a trend we're seeing readers are beginning to expect. Another big area is just compliance generally. And again, this all goes to how are people seeing your brand, right? This is tip number 2, do your brand justice. So there are compliance elements out there that should be considered. Privacy is one. People have an expectation of privacy and that you're going to handle that correctly. So when they engage with your digital edition or your digital content, it needs to meet those expectations. Another big area that we've seen a lot of movement in over the last year specifically is accessibility. There's been some legal actions and a lot of regulation that's kicked into place. And so making sure that people with disabilities, visually impaired or hearing impaired, have access to your content appropriately, there's been a lot of effort in that area. And one of the guidelines that we look at is web content accessibility guidelines. That's kind of developing into the standard there. But if you already have accessibility requirements in a brick and mortar store and some other component of your business, there's a good chance your digital products also have that requirement. So these are elements that, again, as you're presenting your brand, what's the experience like? How are people viewing it? Is it meeting their expectations? And is it handling some of these compliance needs? These are all important considerations. Now, that flows into just how does it work from a mobile perspective? And that's, part of presenting your brand correctly as well. And mobile, as this slide says, it maybe matters more than ever from the survey that we showed at the beginning. There's a lot of people using their phones, especially now as they're social distancing. They're getting comfortable reading magazine content on phones. And so how you present that and how they can engage with it is important. And so it's important to do it well. What we're seeing is that there's this nice steady adoption of responsive. When it was really being introduced in 2014, 2015, publishers were maybe a little slow to adopt. But now the majority of publishers who reach out and are looking for solutions, one of their first requests is, how can I provide something good on a mobile phone that people will stay engaged with? That's one of the most important needs right now. So that's not going away. It's something that needs to be part of your planning process as you look at your digital strategy. And publishers are pivoting right now. They're doing new things. They're trying to boost that digital presence to make up in some cases for the print maybe going down or their distribution models being interrupted. So getting this right really matters. Adobe did a survey a couple of years ago that I like to cite, but basically, if a reader has a bad experience with your content and it doesn't work on a phone, there's a good chance they don't come back, and you will lose engagement. We've looked at numbers, and so a good impression is important. And I'll jump just ahead a little bit. One of the things we're going to talk about is the importance of communication and promotion. But what we see a lot of publishers needing to do is to basically re-educate their readers. They might have been doing one thing on the digital side or the digital edition front for a number of years, and their readers have gotten used to that product behaving a certain way and perhaps not working on a phone. Well, if you just make the switch, change the strategy, and you don't go back to inform them, they're not gonna know really to come back to it and try and experience it again. So it's really important. On the right side of the screen is an actual image that I took when I was reading a magazine that I love. And I blurred out the name so you can't see it, but I just wanted to show you what a bad mobile experience is. And I love this brand. I read the magazine, and you can see they've got this pop-up up top. They have what's coming next. They have essentially limited the reading space to about a third the size of the screen, and even that still has a pop-up. It's just not a good experience. And what readers are really looking for is something that's cleaner and it's uncluttered. And it's been a transition for publishers to be able to embrace that. When we first tried to push this sort of a responsive experience years ago, probably 8-9 years ago, publishers really pushed back on it. Hey, we've spent a lot of time designing pixel perfectly all this content. We want that design to come out however we're showing it. We can't have something different. And then as time went by and readers got used to aggregation apps and having their content kind of filtered and flowed to them, it became where readers just wanted a good, clean, fast experience, and that was most important. So if you have good content, you're still going to be successful with them, but you just need to display that content really well in a nice, clean way. All the extra images and the interactions and the animations have become just clutter, and they want a clean experience. So you need to keep that in mind. Jumping into that tip I was just talking about a few moments ago, promotion is so important. As you're launching a digital strategy, as you're changing it right now during this COVID-19 pandemic, but really at any point, you got to tell your readers what to expect. There's the Field of Dreams movie. I always like to kind of make reference to that. But if you build it, will they come? That's the question. And I can tell you the answer from experience is really no. If you expect in all the content that's out there on the internet that you're just going to put something together that's good and it's just going to be found and success will happen, it can happen, but it's going to be a lot harder. And so if you build it, they won't just come. You need to actually promote it. And it's an interesting exercise because, again, a lot of times I'll talk to publishers and we'll go through this conversation and I'll ask, like, well, so what's value about your digital edition? What is it that you'd like to promote? And a lot of times they haven't even thought of it. And the question I have is, if you don't even know why your digital edition is important or how your digital adds value to the content experience of your readers, how could you possibly expect your readers to know? So I think it's a good exercise. Sit down, figure out what those elements are. I say make a list of 3 to 5 items, decide what you want to promote, and then begin promoting it. Maybe it's, here's some examples. It's easy to read on mobile now. Maybe your readers don't know that and they need to be educated about it. They need to know you have an archive that's sitting out there that can be searched. The issue could be served up quicker. There's exclusive content, but the answers aren't all the same for everyone, but you need to figure out what they are and then truly promote it. And when you promote it, it should be in the magazine, in the print, it should be in the digital edition, in the kind of a replica form like these examples here. You should talk about these different elements, maybe focus on different ones at different times. You should send it out by email, and you shouldn't stop. And I have a quick case study I'll share with you that we did with one customer. I was looking through results just to see where, if I saw anyone who had a lot of success when they switched to a responsive platform, and I found a customer who did, and their numbers were extraordinary. They went from kind of whatever they were at to the day they switched, all their numbers tripled. And they didn't just immediately triple, they tripled over the course of the next, like at the point that I was looking, it was 18 months later and their numbers were still triple. So they tripled the amount of people looking at it, the amount of interaction and engagement, and they sustained that the entire time. And it literally happened in a one-day moment. And so I reached out to them and just asked, hey, what happened here? I'd like to think our platform is amazing and did this, but realistically, that's probably, that couldn't happen. So what did happen? Well, the facts are they made the choice to do all these things that we're kind of talking about, and their branding and mobile and audio and all these elements. And they started promoting it like 3 months in advance. And they just started emailing all their subscribers, gave them new options. Hey, here's this digital option. You need to know it's going to be different than what you used to expect. And when they launched it, day one, they hit the ground running. And it was amazing results. But it just goes to show you that that's a really important element. Last bit, and I'm almost out of time to jump into questions, but when you're doing digital and you're looking at your digital edition, you really need to think about your advertising strategy, because it's not going to work like it has before. Traditionally you've had probably you dealt with advertisers in your print and you dealt with advertisers in your web, and the digital edition is kind of just sat in this weird status where it just carried over what was in the print. Well, with customers we work with, I want to share that the vast majority of them don't just take the printed advertisement and put it into a responsive mobile view, because as you can see in this view, you can't read it. And so it just doesn't, it's not a good presentation of that advertiser. And it's not a good presentation for the publisher and their brand. And so this is an opportunity. As you explore digital editions and you have a responsive version, you need to look at how you're advertising, how you're monetizing that, and do something different. There are a lot of opportunities. All platforms, most digital platforms have all kinds of unique digital-only advertising spaces. One suggestion I have when I talk to publishers is consider a sponsorship. Put together a package of 5, 3, 4, 5 units. You're selling at one time, and you're giving that sponsor kind of max visibility. And so that's sometimes an easy first step, because I'll hear from publishers, well, my sales team don't quite know how to sell this. And where does this sit in the spectrum, right? You got super valuable print ad and not so valuable web ad. Where's a digital edition ad? Well, in my opinion, it sits kind of in the middle, but it leans a bit more towards your magazine kind of rates, because the people reading your digital edition, they're closer to the magazine space. They want that curated packaged experience. They're a little more of a committed reader, and so I think the people who view it, there's more value to them. So something to consider as you look at your advertising. One other idea that I really like is the idea of a pavilion. You can do this on your website. You can do this as part of a digital edition, but it's just like a little option where maybe you can have 5 to 10 sponsors that have content that sit in a pavilion. If you do it, you need to tell your readers about it, as we already talked about, and make sure they know we have this pavilion. It's going to have more information about some key sponsors. Maybe it's got videos or some useful resources. Maybe they have Ask the Expert kind of video, events or something, and maybe there's offers associated with it. But figure out the value add. It's easy. You put it together once. They can live there for a long time and kind of, maybe swap out assets here and there. But I think it's a really good option. Finally, just kind of go into some takeaways, just to talk about the 5 things we went through. Model. Again, stick with a curated, package delivered experience. Brand, don't take a shortcut. It's your brand. If you're presenting it out there, it should be nice. Mobile still matters. It needs to be a responsive view. Even though readers still care about seeing that old form, they want it to work on their phone correctly. Promote it, promote it, promote it, and then rethink the advertising, see what works. There's no set answer, but there's a solution there. That's all. Wanted to get through it in roughly 20 minutes, so we have a few minutes for questions.
Brilliant, Paul. That's very interesting. Yes, we do have a few questions. First of all, do you have any information on readership for B2B digital magazines, separate from consumer magazines?
Well, we do. I mean, at BlueToad, a good majority of the magazines that we work with are B2B, and they have very devoted readers, and very, obviously niche topics. So I'm not sure what the question's getting at, but usually they might have less readers, obviously, than a consumer, but they have readers who are extremely invested in the brand, have some sort of business purpose for it. And we do a lot of that content. I don't know if there's something more specific you think we should talk about.
No, that's. I think that's a good start. Paul, some more. What would you say to readers who value the feel of a printed magazine sat on a coffee table to revisit time and again? And what can be done to raise a digital magazine above all the digital noise, emails and web pages and the like?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the things we talked about. First off, let's understand print's not going to go away, or at least anytime soon. And I love the print experience personally. So there's a place for that, and there's going to be readers who want that. But digital has a different purpose sometimes. Even the person that gets the print might have a good value for the digital. Hey, you got a little bit quicker. You could quickly highlight, look through, see what's in it, do a search. And then when you get the physical printed version, you have something that you could sit down and enjoy and consume it, in a longer form. And then you also have it now, it's archived, you know where it's at, you can go back, you can search it, find it later. That great article from a year ago is easy to get to. So they just need to understand there's a lot of different journeys, and the readers are going to be looking at different content, and you need to satisfy them to the best you can. And I think the companionship between print and digital works really well. And I think from a standing out, I mean, I'm a big believer that, I don't trust a lot of content. I'm just reading. When I search something, I just see website articles, and I just see content, like I showed San Francisco. If, visiting you can find a million things on visiting San Francisco, but you find a brand that produces, again, a packaged product. I trust that a bit more, and I think that's what they're all about, and that's what you need to look at as you're developing your strategy.
Brilliant. What do you feel is the best approach to making an attractive digital edition for kids, especially given the conflict with many parents looking for their kids to have less screen time?
Well, that's more of a hot potato topic than than it might sound. First off, anytime you're dealing with kids, you got a lot of compliance issues that you need to consider. So, there are child online protection acts and things that need to be considered as you deliver content. But I think, just generally, people in general, they want good content, right? They want content that they can engage with, and we do kids content. Again, there's just certain things that you got to think through and handle appropriately in how you collect data and how you interact with those readers. But I don't see much of a difference. I think, the same things you would do to change your content in a printed form, you're going to be doing in a digital form to keep them engaged.
Okay, brilliant. In your experience, does the inclusion of rich media, such as video, really impact on reader engagement levels?
Yes, yes and no. So I think there was a moment where publishers got super excited and they were doing overly interactive editions, right? You would be reading something and you would have some animated muffin fly at you because there was a recipe, or, there was just stuff like that constantly. A light moving over into the center and setting down on a table. Animations, I don't think do very much for you. I think readers, it slows down the process. They just want to get to the content. But videos, I think, do have a really good place, because it keeps, one, it's some exclusive kind of digital only content that you can use to enhance the experience. It's different than print, and it's a great companion kind of element there. But I've seen those customers who do include video are going to have longer engagement times, simply because somebody's clicking on a video and they're watching the video. And so they're going to be sitting on that page a little bit longer. They're going to be engaging with the brand a little bit longer. So if it's good video content, I think it makes total sense to embrace that and to build it into the experience.
Okay, great. How do your publishing customers use the data you provide in their advertising and sponsorship discussions?
Yeah, well, as it specifically relates to advertising, I think, everyone does things differently. Too many publishers don't use data well at all, and I think they need to dig into that a bit more, and they need to be looking at it because it can inform a lot of things. From an advertising perspective, if you got good numbers, publishers are eager to share them, and when they don't have as good of numbers, they just kind of maybe hide that a little bit, or they at least don't offer it up. So it really is a mixed bag, but typically the customers who are involved and they care, they're checking those numbers, they're looking at the reports, they are sharing the data. They can run data on obviously specific ads. We have some advertisers for customers that want to have like a tracker that's embedded into that page so that they can track that information themselves. So there are a lot of options there, but I think more important than anything, publishers need to look at their data, not just for advertisers, but for their editorial content, and use it to inform how they develop their strategy.
Okay, great. With audio articles, is this usually a pre-recorded human reading or a computer-generated service?
So it's a mixture. So for us, one thing we found with publishers is they need something easy typically. And so I think audio is on the lower end of the low-hanging fruit that you can do. If you have a good microphone in a quiet room, you can record good audio. And so we have customers who do that, and you have something that sounds just like this being read to the reader. But technology has improved dramatically. We have a partnership with Amazon, and they're reading their voice technology, and they have some new voices that came out this past year that we were able to introduce that sound amazing, quite honestly. And already it's at a point where I could have a hard time distinguishing it between a real person. And I have no doubt that in the next 12 months, we probably won't be able to distinguish it. So that automated technology, the nice thing about it is you just click a button and you have that version for all your articles, and you don't have to do any work for it, and the cost is really low. So, people do both, and I think they're both working really well.
Brilliant. A couple more for you. How can I convince my bosses that PDF replicas are no longer the way to go with digital editions. It's outdated technology which isn't useful for readers or advertisers, but the bosses only come up with barriers as to why we can't move away from this format.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's one of those check the box things. If you don't care and data's not that important, the experience isn't that important, mobile isn't that important. The PDF is this again older kind of constrained version of your content, right? It's not going to reformat. It's not going to work well on a mobile device unless you built the image in the PDF to work that way. And so I think it's just getting that buy-in that, again, this is your brand. You're putting a PDF of your edition on a website. I mean, a lot of people are going to be using a phone to get to it. You try reading it and see how that experience is. I don't think it's a good one. I did not read replica versions of magazines on a phone until they started becoming responsive and I could do it and not kill my eyesight and, have a difficult time. So I think you just got to get them down that path. There's a lot of analytics to be had. It's an overall better experience. And you're also pulling that content out as part of that process. So now those articles live in ways that they can be used. They can be fed into aggregator systems. You can connect marketing automation to them and do deeper dives into how you see readers and behave depending on the type of your content, especially in the B2B world. If you're using this to build leads potentially, there's a lot that can be done there. So that's a long topic, but that's as short an answer as I can give.
Okay, great. What are the differences in reader habits between US readers and UK readers, and what should we learn from them?
Wow, that's a great question, and I'll be real honest. I don't have an answer for that. I think, there was we obviously operate globally, and we have operations both in Europe and the US, and we work with customers in both. There's maybe privacy was a little bit more of an emphasis over the past couple of years, and so you had maybe a few more barriers. We need to make sure we had everyone kind of triple opted in before we really had communications and sent them information and content, and how we collected data. In the US, it was a little less restricted, but that's all, it's slowly becoming more restricted so that there's this even kind of element. Beyond that, I really don't know. I think, I don't have an answer. I haven't looked at the data to really compare, those two geographic areas to see if there's major differences in how they engage with digital content.
Okay, great. How can you encourage older readers to make the switch from print to digital?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Some of our first customers were 50 plus kind of lifestyle customers. I've also attended for several years the North American Mature Publishers Association, which is a great group of people, and they have a blast at their events. And but I think digital is an excellent option. Those customers that embraced it very early on, 13, 14 years ago, one of the main reasons is because we created text versions of the articles that could be resized very easily. So from a reading perspective, they could just blow up the text and read it in a reflowed way. And it was very nice. And, there's the mature market is interesting, and they have specific kind of desires and needs, and they like kind of games, and they like things that kind of they can interact with. So it's a little bit different, but I think digital editions, most of that mature market, they are using phones. They've got computers. I think it's a great opportunity there.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about how best to promote digital magazines, where to promote, etc., to engage the audience? Is it via newsletter, social media?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, but I think an important element to me, I believe that it's your brand as a publisher, and you're in control of how you promote that brand. And if a reader is going to connect with you, it's probably going to be because of your efforts. And so there's aggregation platforms out there where you can just put your content on it and hope that it gets seen. I don't generally see that as being that successful. But when you are promoting it and you are getting your readers to connect, I think it comes back to some of the things we talked about, right? It's making sure you're having the right kind of presentation of your brand, but making sure you tell them about it. That's so many times I've sat down I've gone to meetings. We sat down in a big conference room. There's eight people from the publisher there. We look at their data. No one's looking at their digital edition. We go, okay, how have you gotten this out there? Well, we told nobody about it. It's not easily accessible on our website. You got to put it out there. You got to tell them why. Readers need to know. And when you do tell them, and right now with COVID-19, I think it's even more important, right? Here's why you should stay connected with us. Here's what we're doing with our content. We're escaping, and we're not talking about COVID-19, or we are going to talk about COVID-19, or whatever those elements are, but communicate that to your readers. I think that's the most important thing. I think it should be done by email, on your website. It should be done in your print. It should be done in your digital edition, and then through social media as well.
Okay. Are there any particular digital editions out there that you admire?
That I admire?
Yeah. So what digital editions out there do you most admire?
Well, again, that's, I try and stay as unbiased as possible, but I read a lot of the content that's on our system. We work with a lot of different publishers, and I admire the ones that are giving me good, clean content experiences. And that's what I admire most, because I want to be able to read it easily and quickly. I don't want a lot of distraction. We've even gone so far as to have suggestions for publishers where, hey, just include one image at the top, and they just put easily formatted text below. Don't get too complicated. When somebody's on a phone, it just needs to be that clean. That's what I admire most. Beyond going into personal preferences of what sorts of topics and things, from a functionality standpoint, to me, I think that's most important.
Paul, this is great stuff. We've kind of overrun, but I think it's time for just one more, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
How are you seeing publishers adapt their digital edition strategies as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, I think they're all taking it more seriously. We see a lot more calls. Existing customers and new customers, those who were doing kind of basic check the box sort of work, now want something more engaging. I think when digital becomes one of the more primary channels to deliver content, you now care about it a bit more. When it was just kind of an add-on to the print, it was easy to just check the box and kind of let it do whatever it was going to do. And so what we're seeing is just an interest in making sure it's mobile friendly, making sure it's branded correctly, that it's just a step up, and they're taking it more seriously. That's the biggest element. Again, we work with a lot of publishers. There are some that are struggling, that are having trouble with advertisers, that are cutting page counts and that sort of stuff. But those are, quite honestly, very few conversations we're having. More conversations we're having is, hey, how do I stay engaged? How do I keep, when times are bad, you got to advertise even more. And I think it's a similar concept with publishers. You need to get that brand out more. This is the time to make connections and grow readership.
Paul, thank you very much. I think we've overrun by a little. There are loads of questions, and I apologize that we didn't get to them all. So sorry if yours was one of those. But Paul, thank you very much. As a really fascinating presentation.
Thank you, James.
A recording of today's webinar will be available soon, and we will email you a link to it sometime tomorrow afternoon. We will be publishing more information about forthcoming webinars shortly, so do keep an eye on our website. If you're a supplier to the industry and are interested in discussing sponsorship opportunities around our Top Tips webinar program, then please get in touch with my colleague, Martin Maynard. Until next time, stay safe, thank you for listening, and have a very good afternoon.